Let's check the latest news updates with APARNA VATS.
Namaskar. Welcome to Friends World TV. This is the English Bulletin. I'm APARNA VATS and here are the headlines. In 100-day message, PM Modi cites big change in J&K, invokes Ezreal Spirit. India will put an end to single-use plastic in the coming years, says PM Modi. Hong Kong tells US to stay out. Students form protest chains. Trump calls off secret meeting with Taliban Afghan leaders. African swine fever tipped to spread, but biosecurity levy still in limbo. Andreescu's first slam title at US Open prevents Serena's 24th. 19 slams, Nadal stops Medvedev comeback bid to win US Open. The news in detail. In those 100 seconds after 1:50 a.m., I experienced something. I saw how one incident kept the entire country awake. It brought the country together, PM Modi said. Terming the 130 crore people of India as the inspiration behind the major decisions taken during the first 100 days of his government, Prime Minister Narendra Modi Sunday said work had started towards fulfilling the dreams and aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. Addressing the BJP's Vijay Sankalp rally in pole-bound Haryana's Rohtak, Modi also made a mention of India's moon mission Chandrayaan-2, saying that while the country had known sportsman spirit so far, it had now found ISRO, Indian Space Research Organisation spirit. Towards the end of his nearly 50-minute-long speech, Modi talked about the mission, which met with a major setback in the early hours of September 7 when it lost contact with a lander headed for the surface of the moon. In those 100 seconds after 1:50 a.m., I experienced something. I saw how one incident kept the entire country awake. It brought the country together. I want to say that like sportsman spirit, we have ISRO spirit. The country is not ready to accept negativity today. The country has changed the parameters of success and failure. अब देश पुरुषार्थ की पूजा करता है, पराक्रम की पूजा करता है. अब देश परिवर्तन की आस्था को लेके चल पड़ा है. The country now honors showing of might, projection of strength, and has started moving forward with faith of change, he said. Earlier in his speech, Modi said, in the last 100 days, the country and the world have seen that every challenge, be it decades old or of the future, India today challenges every challenge. We know how to take on challenges, be it Jammu Kashmir, Ladakh, or the deepening water crisis. 130 crore Indians have started looking for new solutions. जम्मू कश्मीर लद्दाख में एक नई सोच के साथ उनके सपने और आकांक्षाओं का पूर्ण करने में हम जुड़ गए हैं. We are working to fulfill the dreams, aspirations of the people of J&K Ladakh with new thinking. Last month, the Modi government had abrogated Article 370, giving special status to J&K, soon after putting it under a lockdown, which entered its 35th day on Sunday. These 100 days have been of development, trust, and big changes in the country. These 100 days have been of decision, dedication, and good intentions. Whatever major decisions we have taken, the inspiration has come from the 130 crore Indians, Modi said. Going on to take a jibe at the opposition without naming anyone, he said, in the last 100 days, some people are clueless as to how to react. It's as if the poll defeat has numbed them and turned their minds blank. He said the government had made laws on agriculture, issues related to national security, while also securing the rights of Muslim women. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed a high-level segment meeting at the gathering at the Conference of Parties, which is COP14, on Monday and said that climate change was leading to land degradation of various kinds. He said that India would be happy to propose initiatives for greater cooperation in addressing issues of climate change, biodiversity and land degradation. Earlier, Union Environment Minister Prakash Javadekar addressed the gathering and talked about India's agenda of combating desertification. India is hosting the UNCCD COP14 from September 2 to September 13th. The conference, being held at India Expo Mart in Greater Noida, is aimed at adding to the global discourse on environmental issues, especially those relating to land management. Around 196 countries and 94 environment ministers are taking part in the mega event. Ministers are expected to announce their targets for land restoration and come to a consensus on measures to address the emerging threats of forced migration, sand and dust storms, and on actions to strengthen resilience to droughts. PM Modi emphasized that India aims to increase the total area restored from land degradation to increase from 21 million hectares to 26 million hectares. He also added that India's tree cover has increased by 0.8 million hectares between 2015 and 2017. Thousands of students formed human chains outside schools across Hong Kong on Monday to show solidarity to push for democratic reforms after violent weekend clashes in the semi-autonomous Chinese territory. The silent protest comes as the Hong Kong government condemned the illegal behavior of radical protesters and warned the US to stay out of its affairs. Thousands of demonstrators held a peaceful march on Sunday to the US consulate to seek Washington's support. But violence erupted later in the day in a business and retail district as protesters vandalized subway stations, set fires and blocked traffic, prompting police to fire tear gas. Hong Kong's government agreed last week to withdraw an extradition bill that sparked a summer of protests, but demonstrators want other demands to be met, including direct elections of city leaders and an independent inquiry into police actions. Protesters in their Sunday march appealed to President Donald Trump to stand with Hong Kong and ensure Congress pass a bill that proposes economic sanctions and penalties on Hong Kong and China officials who are found to be suppressing democracy and human rights in the city. Hong Kong's government expressed regret over the US bill known as the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. It said in a statement Monday that foreign legislatures should not interfere in any form in the internal affairs of Hong Kong. The government said it was very much in Hong Kong's own interest to maintain our autonomy, to safeguard our interests and advantages under the one country, two systems principle after the former British colony returned to Chinese rule in 1997. US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said last week that Hong Kong residents deserve real autonomy and freedom from fear. She urged an end to police violence against protesters and said Congress looks forward to swiftly advancing the Hong Kong bill. The unrest has become the biggest challenge to Beijing's rule. I beg your pardon. The unrest has become the biggest challenge to Beijing's rule since it took over Hong Kong and an embarrassment to its ruling Communist Party ahead of October 1, celebrations of its 70th year in power. Beijing and the entirely state-controlled media have portrayed the protests as an effort by criminals to split the territory from China, backed by what it said was hostile foreigners. Trump has suggested it's matter for China to handle, though he also has said no violence should be used. Political analysts suggest that his response was muted because he doesn't want to disrupt talks with China over their tariff war. High school and university students across Hong Kong held hands for a second straight week Monday to form long human chains that snaked into the streets outside their schools before the bell rang. They were joined by many graduates wearing the protesters' trademark black tops and masks. President Donald Trump said Saturday he cancelled a secret weekend meeting at Camp David with Taliban and Afghanistan leaders after a bombing in the past week in Kabul that killed 12 people, including an American soldier, and has called off peace negotiations with the insurgent group. Trump's tweet was surprising because it would mean that the president was ready to host members of the Taliban at the presidential retreat in Maryland just days before the anniversary of the September 11, 2001 attacks. More than 2,400 US troops have been killed since the US invaded Afghanistan to go after the Taliban, which were harboring al-Qaeda leaders responsible for 9/11. Cancelling the talks also goes against Trump's pledge to withdraw the remaining 13,000 to 14,000 troops from Afghanistan and close U.S. involvement in the conflict that is closing in on 18 years. Zalmay Khalilzad, the Trump administration's diplomat talking to the Taliban leaders for months, has said recently that he was on the threshold of an agreement with the Taliban aimed at ending America's longest war. The president, however, has been under pressure from the Afghan government and some lawmakers, including Trump supporter Senator Lindsey Graham, who mistrust the Taliban and think it's too early to withdraw the American forces. On Thursday, a Taliban car bomb exploded and killed an American soldier, a Romanian service member, and 10 civilians in a busy diplomatic area near the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. The bombing was one of the many attacks by the Taliban in recent days during U.S. Taliban talks. It remains unclear if the U.S. Taliban talks are over or only paused. Trump said he called off the peace negotiations after the bombing, but Khalilzad, the U.S. envoy negotiating with the Taliban, was meeting with leaders of the insurgent group in Doha, Qatar on both Thursday and Friday. Many in the Afghan government, which has been sidelined from the U.S. Taliban talks, and among the Afghan people, have been skeptical of the negotiations, fearing there was little, if nothing, in the deal to stop the Taliban from continuing its attacks against civilians. The two shattering Taliban car bombings in Kabul in the past week, which the insurgent group said targeted foreigners but killed far more civilians, renewed those fears. Long-time Afghanistan watchers, including former U.S. officials, apparently didn't see this twist coming. After word emerged that a Washington visit by Afghan President Ashraf Ghani had been postponed, some assumed Ghani had been trying to make a last-minute effort to meet Trump to express concerns about the nearing deal. Speaking in Canberra last week, Chief Veterinary Officer Mark Shipp said the Philippines is due to announce the results of recent testing. Outbreaks of ASF have already been reported in China, Vietnam and Myanmar, resulting in millions of pigs being culled. We are expecting a number of countries to announce they have got ASF in the coming days, and we have already taken steps in preparation for that, Dr. Shipp said. There are a number of countries that are neighboring those that are already infected that have poor vet services and very weak border controls. African swine fever, ASF, does not affect humans but can cause up to 100% mortality in herds of wild and domestic pigs within a week. Pigs mainly contact the virus through the consumption of contaminated pork products and feed. Industry estimates an outbreak of the disease could cause Australia's economy $50 billion. Meanwhile, the federal government will not say when a new biosecurity levy on shipping freight will be introduced, despite having missed two scheduled start dates. The levy, announced in the 2018-19 budget following a 2017 recommendation off the back of a 2017 biosecurity review, was initially slated for introduction on July 1 this year. But a backlash from transport, logistics and shipping companies saw this year's budget defer the levy's introduction until September 1, so that a steering committee could be consulted about how best to implement it. The delay was said to cost $20 million. Agriculture Minister Bridget McKenzie said she was handed the steering committee's report on June 1 and she was working through its recommendations. The government brought down a biosecurity levy to be against containerized and uncontainerized cargo from the shipping industry because that is where essentially the major risk is, Ms. McKenzie said. We are wanting to make sure we implement that biosecurity levy as soon as possible. Last week, the National Farmers Federation called on the government to prioritize the introduction of the levy. It is crucial that the levy makes available additional funding to strengthen biosecurity systems and is not a substitution of existing government funding or lost to consolidated revenue, NFF Chief Executive Tony Maher said. Mr. Maher estimated that by 2032, the number of shipping containers arriving in Australia each year was set to reach 19.4 million. Now, to sports. Bianca Andreescu knew this would happen because she knows all about Serena Williams, looked up to her, dreamed of playing her. Andreescu knew Williams would not go quietly, knew Williams would not make things easy, and so as a big lead in the US Open final dwindled Saturday as she stuffed fingers in her ears to drown out the decibels from the delirious thousands filling Arthur Ashe Stadium, Andreescu knew she needed to be just as bold and hit just as big as she did earlier in the match, and as Williams has done for years. Displaying the same brand of in-your-face tennis, Williams seemed to invent, replete with strong serves, gutsy ground strokes, and "come on" cries. The 19-year-old Andreescu regained the upper hand and pulled out a 6-3, 7-5 victory at Flushing Meadows to win her first Grand Slam title and keep Williams from collecting a record-tying 24th. I'm sure I'm not the only person that's looked up to her. She's an inspiration to many, many people, not only athletes. What she's done off the court too. She's truly a champion. Above all, she's very kind-hearted. She came up to me in the locker room. She said some really nice things, which I will cherish for a really, really long time, Andreescu said about the 37-year-old Williams. I have really strived to be like her, Andreescu said. Who knows, maybe I can be even better. Andreescu is the first woman in the Open era, which began in 1968, to win the championship in New York in her tournament debut. A year ago, she couldn't even make it onto the field because she lost in the first round of qualifying. She is the first woman since Monica Seles in 1990 to lift the trophy in only her fourth Grand Slam tournament. She is the first player from Canada to win a Grand Slam singles title. This is the second year in a row that Williams has lost in the final at Flushing Meadows. This one had none of the controversy of 2018 when she got into an extended argument with the chair umpire while being beaten by Naomi Osaka. Williams has now been the runner-up at 4 of the 7 majors she has entered since returning to the tour after having a baby 2 years ago. The American remains stuck on 23 Grand Slam singles titles, one shy of Margaret Court's mark for the most in history. What had all the makings of a casual crowning morphed into a grueling contest thanks to Nadal's opponent, Daniil Medvedev, a man a decade younger and appearing in his first major title match. Down by 2 sets and a break, Medvedev shifted styles, upped his level against a rattled Nadal, and even received an unexpected boost from the Arthur Ashe Stadium spectators. Truly tested for the only time in the tournament, the number 2 seeded Nadal managed to stop Medvedev's surge Sunday and hold off his historic comeback bid, pulling out a 7-5, 6-3, 5-7, 4-6, 6-4 victory in 4 hours and 50 minutes of highlight-worthy action and Broadway-worthy drama to collect his 4th championship at Flushing Meadows. One of the most emotional nights of my tennis career, said Nadal, who covered his face with his hands while crying when arena video boards showed clips from each of his slam triumphs. The last 3 hours of the match have been very, very intense, Nadal said, very tough mentally and physically too. Now at 19 majors, a total Medvedev called outrageous, Nadal is merely 1 away from rival Roger Federer's record for men. Namaskar, I'll be back with more news next week.